Welcome back, scholars. This is the independent practice section of lesson 9, or on the Kingsbury sheet, lesson 22. So we are on page 80 of our iReady book. Today's origami of the day is a dragon, and he will be helping us keep track of where we are reading. This is Prime Contact by Justin Greenfield. Again, this is science fiction, so we're thinking about House of Scorpion, just like before. Imperator's Log, the 36th of Quelnar, 1478. Do not get overwhelmed with that. They're just making up a new time period. But if we're continuing to think about summary, remember we're thinking about plot, characters, and setting. So that is what you need to be annotating for, is plot, characters, and setting. Today I had a fascinating meeting with a promising new captain by the name of Aaliyah. The first thing I noticed about her was the remarkable hue of her purple eyes, much more vibrant than the rest of ours. At any rate, she relayed to me how her crew had recently returned from a mission to the third planet from the central star, where they had had an encounter with one of the dominant life forms. I inquired as to the extent of the creature's technology, and Aaliyah replied that they had had advanced machines but preferred to let their servants operate them. These servants live with them. In fact, there are often several servants in each home. They walk about on two legs, prepare food, and feed their four-legged masters. Aaliyah then told me that a member of this alien race had returned with them on their ship. Of course, I asked to see the creature straight away, and when it was brought into my throne room, I was taken with how friendly it appeared, inviting but cautious. Its wide green eyes were alert and confident, but dare I say, bored? Since it was a very short and very furry sort of alien, I lay down on the floor to establish better verbal communication with it. I welcomed it to Harlapan, home of the Galactic Confederacy. The creature stretched out its front legs and appeared to bow. I distinctly heard an odd purring sound coming from it. A form of telepathic language it shares with its species, perhaps? Meow, it said with great dignity before turning to the task of licking its paws. Fascinating. And then, of course, you are answering the two questions in the Google form. Which of the following would you include in a summary of Prime Contact? Make sure you do those gists and see what interesting details you need. Excuse me, not interesting, no opinion. What important details you need. Down here, which is the best summary for the last events of the story? Again, if you do that gist in the bottom section here, you're just matching it up, and that's much simpler. Moving on. Page 82. This is from an actually very famous text called War of the Worlds by H.G. Wells. H.G. Wells actually wrote this small book called The Time Machine. A bunch of my SHSAT students from last year read it. We were actually considering teaching this when we were trying to think about what to do for a third unit, and we ended up picking House of Scorpion. But this is absolutely a classic. So this is not a random text that they made up for this iReady book. This is a famous text. And it's very interesting because it was originally written to be read on the radio, and it caused a mass panic because when people heard on the radio the events in this story, they thought it was really happening. They thought it was a news report instead of a piece of fiction. So I'm going to link below, or maybe I'll put it in the cards up at the top, a link to the recording of the original War of the Worlds, because again, it was meant to be radio. So it was meant to be spoken, and it's overall, it's a pretty interesting story when you consider how it really made people panic, and it's just very interesting. So we're reading the questions first, lines 1 through 7. 1 through 7. Which statement expresses an opinion? Good luck. Lines 8 through 11. That's here. Got number 1. We got number 2. Oh, I'm sorry, not number 2. Fancy pen time. I got these cool friction pens. Exactly for when I make mistakes. I'm into it. Going here, lines 18 through 28. So that's 15, 16, 17, 18, 21, 22, 23, 24. So it starts here. And then it goes all the way down to the end. So this is for number 4. And number 4 is also over here. Then we have foreseen in line 25. Finding that. Foreseen is right here. So we're going to pay attention to that one. And then we have 3 superscripts here. So we have to skim and find those. So number 1 is right here. Number 2 is right there. And number 3 is down here. And these are actual words. So we should take the second to put the synonyms down. So redweed is just a fake plant that they made up for the sake of the story. Number 2 is redoubt, or temporary fortification, or a wall built as defense. And then number 3 is rotting, or having a foul odor. Oh my goodness. So I'm just putting rotting or smelly. And here we go. Now, you know, generally speaking, you would not have your teacher explaining to you why this is such a cool text, so we definitely need to read that blurb up at the top. Earth was not prepared for the Martian invasion that began in a field outside of London. Disbelief turned to horror as the Martian forces spread throughout the country, destroying everything in their path. No human weapons were able to stop their deadly attacks and superior technology. Then a sudden and surprising set of events occurred that changed everything. From War of the Worlds by H.G. Wells. I came upon the wrecked handling machine halfway to St. John's Wood Station. At first I thought a house had fallen across the road. It was only as I clambered among the ruins that I saw, with a start, this mechanical Samson lying, with its tentacles bent and smashed and twisted, among the ruins it had made. The forepart was shattered. It seemed as if it had driven blindly straight at the house, and had been overwhelmed in its overthrow. It seemed to me that this might have been happened by a handling machine escaping from the guidance of its Martian. I could not clamber among the ruins to see it, and the twilight was now far advanced. Wondering still more at all that I had seen, I pushed on towards Primrose Hill. Far away, through a gap in the trees, I saw a second Martian, as motionless as the first, standing in the park toward the zoological gardens, and silent. A little beyond the ruins, about the smashed handling machine, I came upon the red weed again, and found the Regent's Canal, a spongy mass of dark red vegetation. Great mounds had been heaped about the crest of the hill, making a huge wall of it. It was the final and largest place the Martians had made, and from behind these heaps there rose a thin smoke against the sky. Against the skyline an eager dog ran and disappeared. The thought that had flashed into my mind grew real, grew credible. I felt no fear, only a wild trembling exultation, as I ran up the hill toward the motionless monster. Out of the hood hung lank shreds of brown, at which hungry birds pecked and tore. In another moment I had scrambled up the earthen rampart and stood upon its crest, and the interior of the redoubt was below me. A mighty space it was, with gigantic machines here and there within it, huge mounds of material and strange shelter places, and scattered about it, some in their overturned war machines, some in the now rigid handling machines, and a dozen of them, stark and silent and laid in a row, were the Martians, dead, slain by the rotting and the disease bacteria against which their systems were unprepared, slain as late as the redweed was being slain, all after man's devices had failed, by the humblest things that God in his wisdom has put forth upon this earth. For it had come about, indeed, as I and many men may have foreseen, had not terror and disaster blinded our minds. These germs of disease have taken toll of humanity since life began, but there are no bacteria on Mars. And directly these invaders arrived, directly they drank and fed, and their microscopic allies began to work their overthrow. So again, please work on these questions in the Google Forms. Please work on these questions in the Google form. And yes, please do the short response. Yes, please do that. It's not difficult, especially because this is the second day that we are working on summary. A lot of you are asking, where did the Google Forms go? Well, like I said earlier, this was my first time using Google Classroom, and I found out the hard way that Google Forms only counts your responses automatically if I have it as a separate Google form. So you have to go back to that original classwork stream with all of the different assignments, and then you can see the Google form listed separately. So it's going to say lesson 22, submit your answers here, and that's where you can put in these answers. Otherwise, have a lovely day, stay safe, stay home, and make good choices. Bye!